Hello and welcome to Quadriga. Today we're looking at the final assault on Mosul, which has been the biggest prize captured by Islamic State and its most vital source of tax revenues and forced labor. The battle is joined. Iraqi and Kurdish troops, backed by Western airstrikes, are fighting to recapture Islamic State's last major stronghold in Iraq. IS invaded Mosul in 2014 and has occupied it ever since. The battle looks set to be long and brutal. Up to 1 million civilians may try to flee Mosul as the front lines move ever closer to their homes. So what does this battle mean for the people of Mosul itself and for the region as a whole? That's what we're going to be talking about with three people who are following events there very closely. It's a pleasure to welcome Amir Moussawi. He's an Iraqi journalist based in Berlin, and he says a military victory over IS in Mosul means a possibility of a fresh start for Iraq. Daniel Gerlach is the founder and editor-in-chief of Zenith, which is a magazine on the Islamic world. And he says whoever wants to conquer and rule Mosul should remember how it fell into IS hands in the first place, namely through political failure. Unfortunately, our memories tend to be short. And finally, it's a pleasure to welcome Alan Posner. He's a political commentator for the Berlin daily, Die Welt, and he believes IS will soon be history. But what happens then? If the West leaves the region to itself, Sunni rage will create an even more brutal successor. Amir Moussawi, as I hear it, you're going to be leaving within a few hours in order to go to Iraq and accompany and report on this offensive as an embedded journalist in the Special Forces unit known as the Golden Division. What's the mood amongst the people fighting there?
Well, when we ask the people and the officers there on the ground what they are expecting in this battlefield, is this battlefield the same as Fallujah or Ramadi or Tikrit, for example? They say it's totally different because of the city of, it's bigger than the other cities. This is first. And second, IS got enough time, almost more than 2 years, to prepare for this assault. Tunnels, bombs, also mass destruction weapons, chemical weapons. They are expecting everything, but in the end of the day, they are really insisting to put an end of that regime inside Mosul.
And what about when you talk to family and friends in Iraq? Do they truly see this as endgame for IS?
Military, yes. They see this is the end of the journey of IS inside Iraq in military aspect. But I'm not really sure that it could be the end of their ideology inside the region and also in Iraq. I think we should not forget there is a generation lived under the regime of IS and they got all this ideology, and this could be very hard task for Iraqi government.
Daniel Gerlach, experts are predicting that there will be house-to-house fighting of the bitterest sort. They're saying that IS has set up booby traps in Mosul and that it could well use civilians as human shields. What do you think? Will the troops that are seeking to liberate the city nonetheless be seen by the people who've lived under IS command for 2 years as liberators?
No, I don't think so. But nevertheless, if this military operation turns out to be successful, and I think it will be successful, it's just a question of what material and human loss will come with it, then people will accept it. Because I don't think that any of the powers that are about to conquer Mosul, except the Iraqi army, will be staying and will be able to occupy the city and to keep control over it for a long time. And I think this has become clear also when you were following the political debate in the last couple of months. But I think the fight on the ground in the streets is going to be brutal. And there's a lot of discussion about these paramilitary militias that should stay out of the city. But in fact, these paramilitary militias, these Shia militias that everybody is going ballistic about, are the ones that can do the job on the ground because, like it or not, they fight the same way that Daesh, that the Islamic State fighters are fighting. Relentless, brutal, highly motivated, And these are the ones that had done the job so far. So I don't really think that the Iraqi central government can fight Daesh without them, because this fight is not about kicking Daesh out of the city, kicking the Islamic State out of the city. It's about annihilating this organization. And certainly the jihadi fighters that are part of it, some of them will die, many of them will die, but others will try to disappear. They will merge into the society, and they will organize a resistance, terror attacks, as we have seen them before 2014.
Alan Posner, why Mosul? Why now?
Well, why Mosul? Because it's basically Iraq's Aleppo. It's a mercantile city. It's a huge city. Whoever controls Mosul controls the region, whether it be called Iraq or whether it be called the Assyrian Empire or the eastern part of the Ottoman Empire. This was always the prize. It's the hinge between the north, the Kurdish part, and the Shiite part in the southeast and the Sunni part to the south. So this holds Iraq together, and therefore anyone with an ambition to control the whole of Iraq needs that city. So that's why it had. And if you ask why now, well, I think because the time is right. They've been moving. The Iraqis have been moving slowly but surely up the River Tigris and towards Mosul, and they have to do it. I mean, it's a question of credibility, isn't it? I mean, if you say you're going to drive or do away with Daesh, ISIL, whatever you want to call them, then you have to act on your promise, and now's the time.
There is, of course, an echo chamber in the internet that says it has everything to do with the U.S. election, which, of course, is now entering its final phase. Is there anything to such theories?
Well, I don't see what it could have to do with the election, because the Iraqi government is saying it won't be over till the end of the year, and then the election is in 2 weeks. So what does this have to do with one with the other? It's just time. This is an offensive which has been going on for months. You might almost say for a year now, and now they've reached Mosul. That's it. It's not the American. It's not the election. These are conspiracy theories.
I think it has to do with a decision inside Baghdad and between Baghdad and Erbil. The agreement between Erbil and President Barzani and Minister President
Erbil being the Kurdish...
yes, and Iraqi Prime Minister al-Abadi, 2 weeks before the beginning of Operation Mosul, make it possible that Iraqi army have an access to the battlefield from the side of the Kurdish area. And this is one. The second, all these months, what we heard about the preparation of Mosul operation, Iraqi government tried to re-win the tribe inside the Mosul and around the Mosul. There is a tribe, Sunni tribe, Hamdani, Jaburi, Shammar. These tribes should play the main role to get control over the city after they're liberating. And if you cannot do the job without this tribe, without the backup of Sunni tribe in the region. Sorry.
I have to disagree on this point, like relevant to the U.S. election or influenced by the scheduling of the U.S. election. I agree this is not the main reason. But I think there is an element in here. Like those political decisions, the campaign against Mosul has been announced for a long time, and it's been on for a long time, as you say. But I'm very sure that the Americans told those that take the decision in the Iraqi, not only in the political, but also in the military chain of command, you do it now, or we cannot help you. Because the U.S. Air Force, which is having a lot of sorties and is bombing the Islamic State, the so-called in Mosul, can operate. But in this very critical time between a U.S. president leaving the White House and a new president coming in, this is a very critical time in which usually the U.S. government cannot take any major military decisions on the ground. So I think it was important, not for political reasons, to make the Obama administration look better or make them look engaged, or in command, but I think it was a very tactical decision to do it now.
I want to take a closer look at the U.S. Role in this fight. President Obama referred to the battle for Mosul as a major step forward and a milestone. So why does Mosul matter so much?
Mosul lies on the banks of the Tigris River, at the center of a region that's rich in petroleum reserves. After Saddam Hussein was overthrown in 2003, many of his supporters fled to Mosul. Later, they joined forces with the Islamic State organization to launch attacks against the Iraqi government. A force of less than 1,000 Islamic State soldiers occupied Mosul in June 2014, after Iraqi troops threw down their weapons and fled. A few weeks later, IS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi announced the creation of a worldwide caliphate and called on Muslims to come to Iraq and Syria and wage jihad. Since then, Mosul has had tremendous symbolic value for Islamic State.
Amr Mousawi, President Obama took pains in a statement at the beginning of this week to emphasize that it is the Iraqi government that is calling the shots. But experts say that up to half of the U.S. forces in Iraq are involved in this battle in some way. So how independent is the Iraqi government really? And is the U.S. leading the whole thing, at least from behind?
Leading or not leading, it's not the question. In fact, I think the question is how much the American investing in this operation, in military and also in the politics. When we go back to Mr. Daniel Galach, what he said, I mean, what would happen if this operation will not finish quick as they planned? This could cause a problem for the Clinton in this time. I think American playing a main role in military operation. They are giving a backup from the air. They are supporting Iraqi with the artilleries and so on. And beside of this, they trying to balancing the political situation with Iran role inside Iraq. And the American, I think, play the main role to bring the all parties in the boat, Kurd, Shia, Sunnis, in this operation, and they invest a lot.
Alan Posner, you say the U.S. election doesn't really play a role here, but what if things turned really ugly in this assault? What if we see massive civilian casualties knowing that U.S. forces are involved? Could that not have an impact on public opinion in the U.S. and indeed make things rather difficult for the successor to President Obama?
Yes, it could, which is why I think that this is not determined by electoral politics. This is simply determined by necessity. The fact is that what is going on here, there's a major war across the whole of this area between Sunni and Shia. And the Shia, starting from Iran and going around to their allies in Syria and in Lebanon, Mr. Assad and the Hezbollah and rebels in Yemen, are pushing have been pushing the Sunnis out of their areas for years now. And the new thing about the Obama administration was the attempt, by pivoting towards Iran, to place America not on one side of this issue, whereas the Russians have gone fully behind Iran, Mr. Assad and Hezbollah. And so a lot depends on this, yes, but it's much more than electoral. It's a question of, will America be seen in the new Middle East as an honest broker or as someone who is on the side of one or the other?
So, Daniel Gerlach, your opening statement reminded us that we often have short memories. The fact is that U.S. counterterrorism partnerships in the past have not always had a good record, precisely because of the complexity of sectoral ethnic politics in this region. Mosul, as you point out, wouldn't be in IS hands now if the U.S. hadn't failed in training Iraqi troops. Afghanistan, the Taliban have made steady gains against American-trained military forces. Why should things go any differently now in Iraq? Amr Mousawi has said it's a fresh start. Do you think that's right?
I don't think that the failure of the Americans was not to sufficiently train Iraqi troops, nor do I think that the big failure was not to stay on after they, according to the contract that they had signed, withdrew major parts of their troops. I think it's much more complex than this. And I also, by the way, don't believe, I see the Sunni-Shia antagonism, but I think it's a very simplistic view to say there is a war going on over the region between Sunnis and Shia, and it's good that America doesn't take either side. It's more complex than...
It's obviously more complicated than that.
Okay, that's good. The question here is, why did Mosul fall into the hands of the so-called Islamic State? Mosul was the pride, as Alan said previously, the pride of Iraq. It's a strategically important place. It was economically successful. It was the home base of the Iraqi army. And you wouldn't find any more nationalist spirits in Iraq than in Mosul. Then, after the American-British, whatever, coalition invasion of Iraq and the destruction of the Saddam Hussein regime and his whole security apparatus, Mosul became the disenfranchised part of Iraq. And partly because of sectarian strife, but that's not the only reason. And Mosul was in the hand al-Qaeda troops, where al-Qaeda elements were active in Mosul long before. They were having mafia-kind control on the civilian population. So, and the Iraqi state didn't act against that. I know officials that told me previous to 2014, to when they officially declared their caliphate, who said, I'm never going to Mosul. We as state officials, we never go to Mosul. This is like uncontrollable area. And it's been that like this years before. So for many people in Mosul, the not only the narrative of the disenfranchised Sunnis and those that need to, that support their interest was successful, but also the fact that at least there was one mafia organization, which was the so-called Islamic State, that took over control instead of many mafia organizations that all tried to get their share, fighting each other, blackmailing everybody. So this is a very logical conclusion. In the absence of a state, in the absence of basic protection of the civilians, every authority is better than no authority. And this is why they could create this home base long before 2014. And this is why taking over Mosul was not conquering Mosul, but somebody handed over the keys.
So, Amir Musawi, you told us in your opening statement this could be a fresh start. But the fact is, Iraq's had a couple of opportunities at fresh starts and has not made the most out of them. Long, the U.S. has been saying this is a political problem and it needs a political solution from within, and that solution has not come to pass in the past. Why should it now?
I think we should go back to 2003 when the Americans imposed a political system in Iraq. I think they do not put a lot of efforts to establish a political atmosphere to accepting the others. They just say simply, the Shia have the majority in the country, they go to the election and they are going to get the control or the government in Iraq, and this is wrong. This is the same point wrong when we see now in Turkey, 51% with Erdogan, 49% against him, and in the end, Erdogan make what he wants. But this is not democracy. Democracy should take care of the other opinion to give him the feeling that he's a first-class member of the society, not different classes of the... I talk with the people from Mosul in 2013. They say, I feel myself as a second-class member in this society. I get a long time check in the checkpoint and so on. This is has to do with the political system. And in the end of the day, now the government inside Iraq understood this is a big mistake happened in the past, and this should not happen in the future, especially inside Mosul, where the majority of the people there are Sunni, and they are close to Kurdish area. And the Kurdish area, the ambition of the Kurdish, they would like to keep Mosul as an area supporting possible independent of the Kurds, and think in the end of the day, you should put a political system, give the rights for all people in an equal way.
Some people, Alan Posner, say, looking at this very motley coalition of the anti-IS forces, that the new start we may see is a partitioning of Iraq, that this could be the beginning of that. Do you think that's right?
No, I don't think it's feasible. All this talk partitioning. I mean, we had that back after the First World War, and look what happened. I mean, since time immemorial, this part of the world has been a mix of nationalities, of creeds, and what have you. And, you know, the whole Fertile Crescent from Baghdad right over to Lebanon. And the most you can hope for is to impose some kind of state order within the imperfect boundaries of so-called nation states, which aren't real nation states, and hope that people will be able to manage their affairs. But, you know, there's no way you can draw a border within Iraq which will create neat Kurdish area, neat Sunni area, neat Shia area. That's not going to happen. Plus, Turkey will never allow a Kurdish state to become reality in the north, and we shouldn't want it either.
Daniela, where do you see the political situation developing after a liberation of Mosul? One author on your website has written that the various members of the anti-IS coalition fear each other more than they fear the jihadists.
Yeah. And it's even, again, more complex than this. I have recently talked to a young researcher who came back, who studies, let's say, the fragmentation and the chain of command inside the Kurdish troops. And she says you have people from different parties, different command structures inside this Kurdish bloc, and they also already disagree with each other. They believe that my enemy is not there, my enemy is fighting on my left side or my right side. So even in these units that we perceive as blocks, as monolithic blocks, there is strife and there is a lot of hatred felt. And that's also like very historical. And that's happening in the Iraqi army. It happens with the Shia militias.
Society, Shia.
Everybody
Right.
has some accounts to settle.
Right.
But I don't think that we are dealing with a partition necessarily, but with a very interesting phenomenon that state theory, that could inspire state theory. And that is what I've previously called the non-declared state, which is happening in the north of Iraq. It might be happening in the north of Syria, which is somebody takes power and somebody takes on the duty of performing, of providing some kind of protection, some kind of public services to the citizen. And may he call it a state or not, and effectively he's executing autonomy over a certain territory, and people have the feeling that they're living in some kind of statehood because their first foremost concern is security, and their second concern is, of course, healthcare, wealth, a job, and all these things. So the question is not who is going to, whose flag is going to fly over what city. The question is who is going to provide the services, and that's what's going to mark the new borders of the Middle East, in my view. So everything's on the table, and just like saying we believe in the territorial integrity of Iraq or Syria or whatever, this is the wrong answer.
Let me just very quickly, because we're almost out of time, and I do want to very briefly address two further issues of what happens after a liberation of Mosul. First of all, IS itself could fall back on Raqqa, possibly in Syria. What about all the foreign fighters? Some experts, including members of the EU Commission, are warning that a number of the foreign jihadists could wind up back here in Europe. Do you think that's a serious risk, Amir Musawi, and are we prepared to handle it?
I think so, yes. This is really a serious problem for the Western country, inside, also in Europe, because most of these fighters will or already have flew to the borders, to Syria now, already now. When we are talking now, there is some hundreds of these fighters going back to Bag station in Raqqa or other cities. We should put in mind that you defeat organization military, but not in the ideological. This ideological, some people find this idea is very sexy, to have a state as a caliphate and so on. I think we should make a lot of research about this ideology and how can we face it.
And Alan Posner, finally, refugees. The UN humanitarian coordinator for Iraq is warning that we may see a humanitarian catastrophe, hundreds of thousands of refugees. Do you think that's a very serious risk? And if so, are we equipped to handle that?
Well, it's not a risk, it's a certainty. I mean, I think they're preparing for 400,000 refugees, and they say that it could be more. But they will be dealt with, they will be received and helped within Iraq, within the Kurdish areas especially. And I think that can happen. I don't think we should be worried. I mean, worried. We should care about these people. We should make sure that they get what they need. But that's secondary.
Daniel Gerlach, our title, Final Blow for IS. Is it one?
It's a decisive one, it's a critical one, but it's not the last battle.
Okay. Many thanks to all of you for being with us today, and many thanks to all of you out there for tuning in. See you soon.